All right, I guess we'll get started. I'm going to record this class. I'm also recording Thursday's class as well, so there'll be double videos. Today's lesson is actually going to be slightly condensed. The reason being is that you guys lost Tuesday because of your orientation. So I'm just going to take out some of the intro stuff that we normally do, and we're going to get straight into almost lesson 2. All right, which is good because the first class is just basically me getting to know you guys, that kind of stuff, and you guys being introduced to the subject material. This slide deck is currently live on Blackboard. You are welcome to peruse it. Basically, it just goes through, lets you know what my expectations are, introduces who I am, tells you a little bit about me, walks you through all the different expectations, talks about what happens with academic misconduct, even though you guys probably heard it about 16 times by this point. And I think it also tells you, there's one thing I wanted to cover, which was due dates. Yeah, so due dates with the assignments in this class, they're going to be pretty easy. You have 4 labs altogether, 1 every 3 weeks. They're not hefty. They're actually pretty small. You could do them within probably about an hour. There will be 2 assignments, not projects in this class. They will be bigger and will take you probably a couple of days to complete. And then there will be 2 tests in this class. Plus there's a daily quiz that you can do at your convenience whenever you have a chance. There's no closing date on the quiz. Each quiz is worth 1% of your final grade, so don't just leave them because that's 10% that'll knock against your score. There's 2 bonus quizzes as well that you can achieve, so you can possibly achieve 102, even though in Banner it's just going to be 100. But you can get 102 in this class if you really so badly want to try for it. Submissions, pretty standard stuff. Basically, every class is going to go down. We'll review the last class that we would have. We're going to introduce today's topic, which today's topic is going to be variables and strings. I don't tend to do a lot of lectures. I tend to just like to be interactive, so I like to code, right? And you guys probably like to code, I would hope. So I don't really like to sit there and make slide decks. In fact, the 2 slide decks that are up there will be the only 2 you will ever get because I hate making them. I absolutely loathe making them. So so every day will be basically us diving into code from the second you walk into the class to the point you leave. Will be just code. What else? I do 2 15-minute breaks, which gives you more than enough time to cross all the way across the school to the Tim Hortons there to grab some coffee or food or whatever else. And the last thing is how to communicate with me. So if you haven't signed up to Slack, the invitation link is sitting under Weekly Learning. Under the resources, please sign up to Slack. It's probably the fastest way for you to connect with me. Slack goes to, I'm an Apple fanboy. It goes to my tablet, goes to my iPhone, goes to my Mac, goes everywhere. Like every device that I have connected has Slack on it. So that'll be your quickest way to get a hold of me. Plus it allows us to share files and stuff like that, and it's pretty cool for that type of thing. Plus you can connect with your colleagues. So if I, for whatever reason, can't respond fast enough, hopefully you can get feedback or help from your colleagues as well. It's definitely a good tool for that. Other than that, you can email me. I have 2 groups. I have a group on Tuesday and a group on Thursday. I am not likely to remember who you are unless we slowly get to know each other over the next 14 weeks. So please make sure you include your name, the class that you are in, so that I know who you are. And then a summary of what's wrong with whatever it is that you're having an issue with. If it's code, please include either a link to your GitHub repository where the code is currently stored, or just provide me a zip, because we're doing JavaScript. Most of the stuff we're doing is pretty small. Like, I don't think we're going to have anything that's going to exceed 10 megs by any means, so just send it through in the email if you want. That's totally fine. That's basically it in a nutshell. I'll just go over the syllabus real fast. I'm Sean, by the way. Not to hit you with the intro stick, but all right. All right, meeting time is here, obviously. You're here. Course description, I'll let you read that at your leisure, but it's client-side scripting. We're not going to do any server-side. Sorry if you got your hopes up, but you actually have that maybe next semester or the following semester. You'll have advanced web programming, which will be the mean stack, and that's when you get nitty gritty with Node and Express and all that type of stuff. You may even have me for that. We're going to do just the intro part. Now, the group that I taught in the summer, I taught them the mean stack. The biggest problem that they had is they didn't have any intro JavaScript stuff. So they didn't know what they were dealing with. We wound up having to take an entire dedicated lesson just to intro JavaScript. You guys get 14 weeks of just intro JavaScript, which is pretty cool. Granted, JavaScript isn't really that difficult. It's a little bit to wrap your brain around the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. But for the most part, it's pretty simple. So I would like to, hopefully, by the end of all of this, get to something cool like Phaser, where we can actually build like a two-dimensional game in JavaScript and have some fun towards the end of the semester. I'm looking forward to doing that maybe in week 10. Week 10, week 12, and week 13. We would probably do Phaser, which would be pretty cool. That being said, I did post a game, this is not in Phaser, that you are welcome to play. I can't remember how to do it. Oh, it's WASD. It helps if you read your own instructions. I built this a while ago. You're welcome to play around with that. There's a math library in the background that you are welcome to hijack if you want. It is not the greatest. It is actually probably pretty crappy. P5 would definitely be better, but you are welcome to take a look at that and steal that if you want. What else? Where's my syllabus? There we go. Okay, so there's a few resources. There's no textbook in this class. I don't believe in charging people $200 for a textbook that literally has information that lasts about 5 months, and then it's done. So instead, please use MDN. That should be your Bible for this class, pretty much. YouTube, obviously I'm going to post videos, both the Tuesday and the Thursday class. Don't rely on them, though, because I have a tendency to get distracted, shut my laptop, and leave and totally forget that I was recording and lose the recording, 3 hours of recording. I've had that happen a few times. I will not go back and record it again. So I recommend just showing up as much as possible. If for any reason you're going to miss class on a day that we're going to have a midterm or a final, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but you need to reschedule the midterm and final with the test lab. I think it's in this building, actually. I think it's in B building. Is it over that way? Yeah. So you just go there, tell them you need to schedule the test. They contact me. I send them the information of when you can take it and the codes and all that type of stuff, and then you take it at that point. Okay. What else? That's basically it. I have my GitHub there as well. Any code I post per week will be up on GitHub. The completed solution will be up on GitHub. So not the code that we start with. The starter code that we'll be starting with will basically be comments, and then we'll go through and enter each line in as we go through the activity. But the completed code, when we're done, will be up on GitHub. I believe week 1 and week 2 are already there. All right. I don't have an office. I'm a part-timer. I work outside of here about 30 plus hours a week at a different job, and then I do this as my secondary job. That being said, I have no problem meeting you here up to an hour before class or staying afterwards and having a powwow afterwards. I'm totally cool with that as well. If you need that, please let me know ahead of time so that I can schedule that time with you. And, I'm not dodging out on you and you're expecting me to be here. All right. Expectations for success. You can look at the slide deck. Valuation. So the labs, there's 4 of them altogether. They're each worth 2.5%. So it equals 10 altogether. There's 10 quizzes. There's actually 12. You get 2 kind of gimmies. So if you miss 2 of the quizzes, don't really worry about it. I mean, you really can't miss them. They're wide open. There's no close date on them. Like, just take them whenever you want. If you're already kind of skilled at JavaScript, you could just bang them all off probably in an afternoon. They don't take very long. The max number of questions on them is about 10 questions. That's it. So they're pretty easy. So you can do those. The 2 assignments, the labs will be delivered every 3 weeks. The assignments will be delivered every 4 weeks? Yeah, every 4 weeks. And then they're due in the 6th week. So the first assignment you will get will be in 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. And then it will be due just before reading week, or just before the midterm, actually. I don't like to give things on reading week because I know from experience that it's nice to, like, relax and chill over reading week. make bad choices, stuff like that. That's what Reading Week is about. You don't want to be bogged down with homework. This is basically the schedule of activities. It breaks it down. It tells you when they're going to be assigned, and it tells you when they're due. So that is not concrete. If I find that we're moving too slow or something's not working out, we will change that up a bit. I have had to do that in the past where we've had to push assignments almost into the next semester just because of the progression of the class. I don't think it'll be an issue though. This is intro stuff. It's pretty simple. That's basically it. Any questions about any of the stuff that I've talked about? No? Okay, cool. If you do, if you're one of those people that doesn't really like asking questions out loud in class, there's this wonderful tool that has an invite link under the resources called Slack. Feel free to send me a message on Slack, and I can answer your question discreetly and anonymously, but I can answer your question through there because I do leave Slack open during the class. All right. What else are we on to? We did all that. Yes, the resources folder. So this is under the weekly lessons. There's a resources folder here. This thing's fantastic. Anything I find that just piques my interest that is JavaScript related, I will probably post in here. Most times it'll be like informational, tutorial, or something like that. Sometimes it might be just something fun. Yeah, because every so often, like I have ADHD to the extreme, so I tend to go on a tangent. So I'll put all the tangent stuff towards the bottom, so that way it's not clogging up the rest of it. But in there you will find your Slack invite link. That is a non-expiring link, so you can feel free to click it whenever you're ready. My GitHub account is listed in there as well for Content 73. My other classes that I've taught are also in there. You're welcome to go peruse them if you want to. My YouTube channel is there. It's public, so feel free to subscribe to it. Every time I post up a video, you will get the notification thing through your email. Sean's Shitty Game is up there. That's that one I just showed you. Visual Code IDE. Hopefully you guys have an IDE already that you're kind of comfortable using. If you don't, and you're looking for an IDE that's half decent for JavaScript and you don't want to pay for Sublime, Visual Code is not too bad. It's pretty good. It gives you some code hinting. Code hinting is fantastic when you're trying to learn the syntax of a language. Just a note, all my tests are open book. I'm not sure if I said that already, but all my tests are open book because you guys work in what? Java. You work in this language. You work in HTML and CSS. You work in C#, I think, as well. Yeah, C#. By the time you're done, you're working in like 6, 7 different languages. I don't expect you to remember syntax verbatim. I don't. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't mind open book tests whatsoever. Usually the tests are a code-based problem anyways. So you're really just solving the code problem. All right, what else? There's also a link to Fun Functions. This guy is by far a better JavaScript programmer than I will ever be in my life. He is fantastic. He's funny. It's worthwhile watching him, especially if you want to extend past the intro part of this class. He doesn't really get into things like React so much, but he does a bit of Node. But mostly he really talks about the fundamental concepts behind JavaScript and really the best practices, which is kind of handy to know how the JavaScript community feels about certain things. And he kind of like speaks on that type of behalf, so it's really worthwhile looking at that. And then we also have the Mozilla Developer Network, which should actually be almost at the very top. I'm going to move it right to the top. That's where you're going to find any information about the JavaScript we're going to learn is right there. All the tutorials, any of the intro stuff, any syntax type stuff, anything about a property or a method that's already built into the JavaScript API is all sitting inside that site. So it is definitely a link you want to keep track of. You don't want to lose that link. Bookmark it. You know, that's the link you need. I recommend that over W3 Schools. In case any of you are using W3 Schools, the Mozilla Developer Network is a lot more up to date, and it's a better piece, right? It's a better resource. There's also the fillers. These are basically, if we basically complete class quickly and we have time left over, I will keep inserting fillers into here. And what we'll do is we'll grab a filler and we'll do it. So for example, I've installed Node.js. We'll do that one day. And then I have live server. Live server is fantastic. Basically, you edit your HTML, your JavaScript, or your CSS, and it immediately updates in the browser for you. which is pretty cool. So we'll go through those whenever we have like extra time, which isn't very often. But you are welcome to go ahead and click those and do those at any point that you want. Live server, I definitely recommend, but you will need the Node.js first, so in order to work with live server. Yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. Let's get to the last slide deck that you will ever have in this class. How many of you have actually worked with JavaScript? Wow, yeah, that's not too bad. Yeah, that's pretty good. How many of you worked with Node? Out of curiosity, like from the server side. Oh, okay, cool. It's interesting. The people that have worked with JavaScript worked with Node. Yeah, so we're not going to do Node in this class. Node is actually server-side JavaScript. Node's fantastic though, right? Because Node basically said, okay, let's stop. I don't want to do PHP, JavaScript on the front end, PHP on the back end, MySQL for a database. Like, screw that, right? I want to do the same language at every single point. I want JavaScript on my front end, I want JavaScript in my server, and I want JavaScript in my database. And that was the cool thing about the mean stack, right? Because it gives us Mongo, it gives us Express and Angular and Node, but everything inside there is JavaScript. And the JavaScript you're going to learn in here works both on the server and works in the client as well. So if you're working with Node, you can actually use the JavaScript you learn in here just the same as you would do on the front, on the back as well, which is fantastic. So it's a learn once, right? Learn once and apply to 3 different spots. Because you can apply it to your Mongo database, you can apply it to your Node server, and you can apply it to your client, which is fantastic. I love this. Asynchronicity is a tough word to spell. It's also a very tough word to say. JavaScript is not Java. No. It is not Java, but it is inspired by it. So this wonderful fella here, Brendan Eich, he worked for Netscape. He co-founded Mozilla. He's the wonderful guy that created JavaScript. And he based it on the Java dot syntax, right? You guys have used dot syntax, obviously, because you did Java. Most languages you work with use dot syntax, except for that piece of garbage, PHP, which uses thin arrows. But whatever, we're not going to talk about that. So he uses the dot syntax, but that's where the similarities are done. No similarities after that. Java is a class-based, object-oriented programming language, whereas JavaScript is prototypal. And we're going to talk more about prototypal inheritance as we go along, and we're going to talk more about what that means in future classes. But suffice to say that JavaScript is not Java, okay? Anyways, he based it on the Java syntax. He wrote the whole prototype in 10 days. A programming language. He wrote a programming language in 10 days. That's pretty fantastic. Was originally called LiveScript. I don't know why they abandoned the name. It's definitely better than JScript, right? Does anybody know what JScript is? Ever heard of JScript? That was Microsoft saying, screw you guys, we're going to make our own JavaScript. Yeah, that worked out. As it always does, looking at UIE. JavaScript is a loose language. It definitely gets around, right? When I say loose like this, I mean loose as in it's not statically typed, right? Whereas Java, you have it's statically typed. C++ is statically typed. C, well, not C. C++, C Sharp, C, Objective-C, Swift even. Well, Swift's a little looser, but Swift as well. They're all statically typed. JavaScript is dynamically typed, which means JavaScript will attempt to figure out what you mean on the fly. It will actually take whatever you're assigning to your variable and immediately cast it, and then you can change it later. So if you create a variable and store a string in it, and then decide further down the line that you're going to shove a number into it, it doesn't care. It's not going to get mad. It's not going to yell about it. It's going to let you. It's going to totally let you. However, it does lead to some anomalies sometimes. Like, for example, the plus sign in JavaScript, just like it is in C++. I'm not sure about Java because I'm not a Java programmer. But it's the concatenation symbol, right? So if I have 2 strings and I plus them together, then it concatenates them together. You guys, does anybody not know what concatenation means? No, I figured you were good. But if you do that in JavaScript with an integer and a string, you get 55, right? Whereas you won't get 10. But you might think that that's what would happen because when you use the multiplication operator and you multiply the integer 5 by the string 5, you get 25. right? So it's not always consistent. So you do, even though you don't have statically typed, like it's not statically typed, you should try to abide by the proper rules of keeping variables the data type that you started with, making sure you keep track of that type of thing, right? But we're going to look at that a bit later. Variables, properties, parameters, functions, methods, none of them have data types, right? You're not defining functions as, character, my function name, blah, 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 right? Or not string, integer, my function name, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to define the return type because it's all dynamically typed. There is a pre-processing language called TypeScript, which basically wraps JavaScript and provides static typing in JavaScript. People that are learning JavaScript that come from static languages, they do find TypeScript a little easier to get into because it just follows more of the conventions that they're used to. But I mean, embrace the beast, right? JavaScript is a loose type language. Embrace it. Let it do what it does. Because everything else you do, like pre-processing languages, stuff like that, they take up more resources. They take up more time. So why not use it as natively as possible? And speaking of that, we're not touching Jquery in this class. There is no Jquery in this class. Jquery is something you can learn in an afternoon while having a beer in front of the campfire. You don't need this class for Jquery. We're going to use vanilla JavaScript, and when we're not using vanilla, we'll move into ES5 and ES6 a little bit, but that's about it. And that's only because they're supported in every browser that matters, not IE. It doesn't matter. But like Chrome and Firefox, Safari, Opera, all of them support it. IE 11 supports it. Edge supports it. So we're good. We don't need jQuery. All right, JavaScript can be written in the browser, which is fantastic. You have this wonderful thing called the developer tools. It's in most, I can't think of a browser that it's not in. But they have this cool thing called a console, and you can actually write JavaScript directly in that console, which is great for debugging, right? If you ever coded in PHP, which you guys did, because you had a PHP class, what, last semester? Yeah, PHP class. You regret that. That language doesn't have a console to code in, right? That language, there's the PHP sandbox online, right? It's not grown up enough to have its own console. Ruby has its own console, which is fantastic. I like Ruby. I code a lot in Ruby. JavaScript has its own console, and the cool thing about it is it's right in the browser. Incidentally, does anybody know the other client-side scripting language that you can do in the browser? Yeah. Python? Yeah. You can code Python in the browser? Oh, okay. But you need some sort of third-party library to do that? Yeah, I mean natively. I've installed my browser today, and I open it up. Is there any other client-side that anybody knows of that you can actually code in there? VB Script. Who cares, right? That's really what it boils. I mean, if you're going to make macros, then yeah, sure, why not? But yeah, and supposedly it's fast. Supposedly it's stupid fast, but I don't know. All right. Incidentally, your browsers all have different JavaScript engines inside of them. These people don't agree, right? There's the ECMA standard. We're going to talk more about ECMA later on. ECMA is a specification that basically says, hey, if you're going to say that you're ECMA 6 compliant, then you must have these functions. Okay? You have to have these functions. You have to have these properties as a part of your API, and they have to be available to the user. That's what a specification is. Anybody played with OpenGL? No? WebGL? Any of the GLs? So OpenGL is an open graphics library. A lot of people think it's a language, but it isn't. It's a specification. It basically tells the graphics card company, if you want to implement OpenGL and say that you're OpenGL compliant, then you have to have these API calls inside your graphics card and support it, right? So it's the same thing with this, right? So Chrome, they have the wonderful V8 engine, right? It's written in C++, which makes it really, really fast because it compiles straight down to machine language. So that is ridiculously quick. Currently powers Node. It's the backbone of Node. It did power MongoDB up to version 3.2, and then they switched over to Spidermonkey, which is in Firefox. It existed since 2008. It's good, right? It's good. How many of you are Chrome users? Cool. How many are your Firefox users?
The Firefox does have a good developer edition.
It does. Actually, Firefox has a fantastic debugging tool for JavaScript, and when you're first starting out, actually, screw that. Even if you're just like a long-time JavaScript developer, Firefox is fantastic. Their developer tools, top-notch, definitely compared to Chrome's developer tools. I mean, like, you can always add extensions and stuff like that to make it better, but Firefox does work out of the box. Me, I'm a heavy Chrome user. I kind of get stuck in my way. It's like Sublime. Everybody's like, you got to try this one. You got to try this IDE. I don't know. I just keep coming back to Sublime. I like Sublime, so that's what I use. Firefox Spidermonkey, also written in C++ as well as C, compiles down to machine language, is stupid fast. Actually, recently on a status compared to V8 to Spidermonkey, Spidermonkey actually beat V8. Powers the GNOME desktop, which is a Linux distro, in case you were curious. Now is the backbone of MongoDB. And then there's this Safari Nitro. Cool name for a shitty engine. Written by Apple for Mac OS applications. Compiles directly into native machine code. But if you're like me and you do quite a bit of web development, Safari is like the bane of your existence because it works in Chrome, works in Firefox, and then you go run it in Safari, and everything seems to go weird. Like I don't know. It's almost as bad as IE sometimes, but no, nothing's as bad as that. All right. But which one is faster? Who cares? In the end, it doesn't really matter. Love them or hate them, the engine isn't the important part because you can't control one factor, and that is this person here, the almighty user, right? Not all of us like the user. We like to complain about the user because the user breaks our stuff, right? Which is really our fault. But no, screw it. It's their fault. Every time it's their fault, right? They define accessibility, though, right? So we have to deal with the fact that, this person needs a screen reader. So we have to make our code compliant and accessible so that the screen reader works with it. This person requires some sort of other assistive device. Or this person is using only a tablet because that's their accessible point, right? So we have to make our code and our environment work with that. They establish the audience. They totally establish the audience, right? Like when that Kardashian turned around and said, Snapchat sucks. And they lost almost 2 million users in a day? Wow. Yeah, so they established the audience. I guarantee you that Kardashian does not know how to code. Totally doubt that. Declares popularity. They define that. They state what's going to be popular and what people are going to use. They determine your usability and they control your environment. At the end of the day, without the user, you've got no money, right? You've got no money powering your app, funding your app, doing things. You've got nobody using your app. So love them or hate them, they're around and you gotta embrace them. JavaScript gives us client-side powers. Wow, grammar was not good on that slide. By the way, that's how you spell dun da da da. Yeah. So gives us, like all base belong to us. That's what it reminds me of. Gives us client-side powers. Client-side powers, they're awesome. Client-side powers allow us to do things like store information because we can actually store different information pieces into local storage, which we have available to us in the browser, whether it's implemented by SQLite or it's like some implementation of just local storage. It's basically key-value pair storing. Cookies, right? We've all heard of cookies. Can store using cookies. And we can also store to servers by using AJAX, right? Or any type of basic API fetching. They can unreliably maintain state, and I emphasize the word unreliably because, like I said before, the almighty user does stuff that likes to screw you up. And one of them is delete cookies because my grandson said that I shouldn't keep my cookies around. So because of that, we can't reliably maintain state even though we have local storage and cookies and stuff like that. People delete the cookies. People purge their local storage. People install things like Cookie Blocker, which, my God, your navigation experience must be hell. But people do that, right? So at the end of the day, we can't reliably maintain state. However, we do have some form of kind of state using cookies and local storage and stuff like that. Client is stateless. User has full control over the client. No guarantee that local storage is accessible or cookies are enabled. We can manipulate the mighty DOM, the document object model. We're going to talk about this a lot more over the next few weeks. We're going to be constantly manipulating the DOM, right? The DOM is essentially that HTML document. You guys took HTML. Did you guys think it was Scott?
No, yes.
Who? Jess?
Yes.
Yeah, either way, they probably both emphasize the same thing. HTML is for structure. That's what we use it for. We don't use presentation elements like bold and small and stuff like that. We maintain structure. CSS is your painting tool. That's the thing you use to create the presentations of your structure, right? JavaScript, if we were to think of it this way, HTML is like the foundation and the sticks that make up your house. CSS is like your paint, your wall decorations, and stuff like that. And JavaScript is the disco ball and the shitty 70s porn music in the background. That's JavaScript, okay? JavaScript is the thing that gives flair. Now, if you talk to Scott, he will tell you, do not rely on JavaScript. And I agree. You shouldn't rely on JavaScript. You shouldn't rely on it ever, because every so often we get a letter that comes out, or sorry, an article that comes out that says JavaScript is hacking you. In the background, it's hacking you. So people disable JavaScript. So we use JavaScript to kind of enhance the user experience, right? Create call to action, so to speak, so that when we want them to draw their attention to something, we can make it bounce or shake and stuff like that. That's our reasoning for using JavaScript in this particular class. Obviously, when you get into Node, it changes things entirely. JavaScript also gives us the ability to respond to the user events. User events essentially are like, you know, when you're playing the PS4 and you click X. Has anybody bought Spider-Man?
Yeah. Just came from playing.
That is so much fun. Swinging is the best. It's literally the best thing you will ever do.
And no lag at all.
Yeah,
No
none. So the cool thing about that, when you actually interact with your controller, you're creating user events, right? You're creating input. You guys have learned about input, I'm sure, like 15 times now, right? This is the same kind of idea. We can capture that input in user events, key presses, clicks, anything like that. Scrolling, even, as they scroll through the page, where their mouse is currently located. We can capture all that information and bring it back so that we can do cool stuff. Or not so cool stuff, but things that are functional for us, right? So yeah, we have the ability to respond to their user events. We have user browser APIs, and these are constantly being upgraded, right? Like I talk about ECMA 6, but to be realistic, we're into ECMA 8 now, actually. Every year they update the specification, and every year Chrome is right on top of that. Chrome wants to have that, all the new features, all the new bells and whistles right out of the gate every single time. It takes a little while for other browsers to catch up. So reliably we can use ECMA 6. I mean, unless you want to support IE9, like all the power to you, but for the most part, yeah, we can support ECMA 6, which is cool. But user browser APIs don't stop there. User browser APIs also give us geolocation, right? So now we can actually geolocate devices such as phones, your computer sitting on your desk, stuff like that, providing people give us access to it. We can, what else? We have text-to-speech, which is pretty cool. We'll look at that in a couple of weeks, where you can actually take text on the page and say it outwards using the browser's creepy computer voice, right? We can generate SVG, 2D images, 3D images using WebGL. We have audio control and video control. We can actually even record audio from the user. We can record video from the user, providing they give us access. And then we also have something called push notifications, which is a service that is provided by your browser. And there's a bunch of different services. They're kind of the newer thing that's coming out. I'm sure you guys have experienced push notifications. You go to a website and they're like, hey, how would you like to be notified every time we release an article, right? Those are push notifications, and they're using that service. Then we also have the third-party APIs, right? And when I talk about APIs, people always get confused, and they think that I'm talking about RESTful APIs, right? RESTful APIs are the thing. Don't we always have to, like, you know, do a GET request to this thing so I can pull it back? Like, if I want to get all my Facebook posts, I have to do a GET request and stuff like that. Yes, those are APIs, but those are RESTful APIs. They're a bit different. APIs are application programming interfaces. Basically, what they provide us is a library, right? It's no different than accessing any library. When you guys use Java, I'm sure you connected up libraries. If you guys take my C++ class, you pretty much have to connect a library for everything. You don't get string out of the box. You don't get anything out of the box without connecting it up, right? So application programming interfaces, that's what they are essentially. They're libraries. Libraries that allow you to be able to interact with that particular interface. And we have tons of them. There's Google Maps. There's social media, right? Like Facebook, Twitter, all those. Those are all RESTful APIs. Merchant APIs, shipping APIs, right? CDNs, like the phaser library that we're going to take a look at in a few weeks. P5.js, which is like probably, yeah, don't use my math library, go use P5.js. It's a fantastic library, gives you matrix math, gives you transforms and rotations and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you're into game development, that is the library to go to. Jquery, don't really need it, but it exists and it's out in the wild and it's worthwhile knowing about. And Bootstrap, right? Literally a programmer's best thing in the world. Yeah. Oh, P5.js. No worries. Yeah, P5.js is fantastic. Gives you lots of different stuff. Actually, we're using it at work right now. We're building an organizational hierarchy chart for helping hands. And it's so that they can show all the different members of their helping hands in a nice organizational hierarchy. But they want to be able to zoom in, zoom out, and pan, not tilt, but just pan back and forth. And the P5.js library allows us to do that easily, right? Because it gives us something called projection mapping and stuff, which allows us to do zooming and transformations a lot easier, which is really, really nice. JavaScript is an interpretive, single-threaded, event-based, asynchronous, non-blocking, callback-driven language. Say that 10 times fast. JavaScript is single-threaded, right? A lot of the languages you guys have worked with have been single-threaded. That means basically that we have one pipeline, right? Everybody goes down the same pipeline. The cool thing is, though, is these factors. Event-based, asynchronous. Those take our single pipeline, and they allow Joe here, who's waiting for me to go to my pipeline. Say I'm going off to get a donut, right? And I'm in line for my donut. But over here, they're delivering coffees right away, and Joe just wants a coffee. He can just zoom past me and go get his coffee, and then I just continue to wait for my donut, right? And then I get my donut, and then this guy over here can zoom up and grab his coffee. The asynchronous nature of JavaScript makes it so fast because it allows multiple things to happen without blocking, without stopping the world, so to speak, right? We don't have to wait for one thing to complete in order for us to do another thing, which makes JavaScript extremely, extremely fast. It also makes it a bit confusing to people when they're first learning it because you're so used to writing things linearly, right? You write your code line by line by line. And you have functions, right? Where if it's a function call, obviously it's going to go read the function. But again, it's blocked, right? It hits that function. It enters into that function. This code isn't parsing. It's still, we're stopped. We go through our function, and then we come back out, and then we continue to proceed down our code. JavaScript's like, yeah, you go do your thing. I'm going to continue on. I'm going to keep going through this file until I get to the bottom. Oh, you want me to do this? Cool. Yeah, now we're going back. We're going through the file. So that gets a little bit tricky to understand, and it's only some things. Not all things are non-blocking. Not everything is asynchronous. Most of the stuff we're going to do in the next 4 weeks is synchronous. However, it is something to be aware of, and we're going to do a lot of discussion on the asynchronicity of JavaScript. We're going to talk about things like promises and how to deal with the asynchronous nature so that we can kind of control when things happen, or at least latch on to those events when they occur. So that's pretty cool. There's a Vimeo video here where it's a guy that's relatively new to JavaScript, and he talks about his intro to JavaScript and how he found the experience. And it's a worthwhile thing to watch. It's just this 20 minutes. We're not going to have time to do it in class. Cool. Any questions in that whirlwind? No? Yeah.
Can you explain RESTful APIs?
RESTful APIs? RESTful APIs are representational state APIs. Basically what they do is they provide us a way to access data on a server, right? So usually by the URL structure, we can do things like access the user base and pull back the user base, right? Just by doing a call to that API. And it returns back to us some sort of data structure, usually JSON lately. Yeah. However, we do have XML. Some APIs still use XML, especially archaic ones like Moneris, for example. What a nightmare that thing was. I had to connect Moneris payment system up to an application we just recently built, and it's all XML, which is a nightmare to work with. I much prefer JSON. We are going to look at JSON in this class because it's worthwhile knowing. But yeah, so the idea of the idea of RESTful APIs is that it gives you a list of URLs that you use to connect. And then there's further extensions to that, such as like authentication, which you can do through things like OAuth or basic auth and stuff like that, that allow some things to be protected and not public. And then there's other things that are public. We are going to connect to APIs. That's I want to try to hit it about week 9, I would say. We'll try to connect to the best API there is, which is the Matt Bass API, which is an insult API. It's fantastic. It totally makes fun of you. It's a very, very cool API. But we will try to connect to that at some point. I was trying to do it earlier than later because we're going to build a phrase guessing game, kind of like Wheel of Fortune idea. And I wanted to actually pull the phrases from the Matt Bass library, but it wouldn't work, not unless we connect to a server, so we'll have to do the server stuff first. But yeah, any other questions? No? Okay. I will close this off. I think we went through all this stuff here. That's phaser, user interfaces, fillers, week 1. Cool. Let's get rid of all that. Okay, it is 4:43. And I'd like to power through a few of these at once. So why don't we take our first 15-minute now. You guys can grab some coffee, kind of like digest my whirlwind. And then come back and we will jump into, we're going to skip the JavaScript first steps and we're going to go straight into building a game. All right, we'll build a game, just a simple game. Don't get freaked out. Build a very simple game and then, and then we'll move on to the next part. Cool. I'll see you in 15. All right, I guess we'll start again. 1 second, just close that off. Okay, if you could do me a favor, inside the weekly learning, if you want to follow along, some people like to just watch me talk, which I would think would be boring. I'd want to code along, but some people just want to watch me talk. That's totally cool. If you could download the number guessing game starter files, so just click on them, save them to your desktop, wherever you want, doesn't matter. You can always make a comp 1073 folder week 1 if you want to do that. That's totally cool. I'm just going to put them right on my desktop. And then in your IDE, you're going to want to open up that folder after you've decompressed it. Out of curiosity, can anybody not read this text that's currently up there? Cool. I like to try to make it at least as small as possible so that I can get as much on the screen as possible. So I'm just going to open up that folder, the number guessing game folder. So I put it on my desktop. Click open. Now I've had a few people ask me what development environment I'm going to use. The IDE that I'm using is Sublime. Like I said, you're welcome to use whatever development environment you want. I did provide a link to the development environment for Microsoft Visual Code, which you can find under Weekly Learning. Under the resources, if you scroll down, you'll see it just about the second link from the bottom. That is like, the kind of history behind that was this group of guys basically said, we love Sublime. We absolutely love the way Sublime works, TextMate, any of those type of like lightweight IDEs work. But we want some of the stuff that Visual Studio has, like some of the robustness with code hinting, IntelliSense. I want to be able to code like C++ in like a lightweight browser like that. But I do want those cool things that Sublime and TextMate gave me, which is like multi-cursor. Multi-cursor is fantastic. You can actually, if you're on a Mac or Windows, you can either command or control. You can left click and put like multiple cursors on the screen. So if you need to correct the same word or write the same thing in like 6 different spots, you can do that all at the same time, which is fantastic. Multi-cursor is probably like one of the biggest godsends. I'll show it quite a bit because I tend to love my IDE and all the little shortcuts in it. But anyways, Visual Studio Code, the cool thing about it is it's very lightweight. It's very small. It's not like the heavy hitter that Visual Studio is. Now, you can code JavaScript in Visual Studio. You can download the module for it, wait for that 4 gigs to download, and then go nuts, right? Have it crash every 30 minutes or so. But Visual Studio Code kind of gets away from that. It's very lightweight. It's very easy to use. Okay. The other thing is too is if you're new to JavaScript, brand new to JavaScript, and you kind of appreciate things like code hinting, I think Sublime will give you some code hinting, but Visual Studio Code gives it to you right out of the box. So it might be worthwhile to use that over Sublime. Otherwise, you can use Sublime, and you can get Sublime in 2 different ways. You can either pay for it, or, and I'm not talking about piracy. You can either pay for it, or you can let it nag you every 10 saves, which I worked with a senior developer that did that for 3 years. Just let it nag him. Never paid for it once. I don't know why, but whatever. All right, so once you have your folder downloaded and you've opened it up, and you want to open the whole folder so that you have all 3 files. You want the index file, the main.js file, and the styles.css file. Cool. I'm also going to keep the browser over to the right because I'm actually going to use it to display what changes we make. So in order to, there's 2 different ways you can open up your this project that we're working on into your browser. Create a new tab in your browser and either go to File, Open File, go to where that index file is in that starter thing, click on it, and click Open. Or open the folder in File Explorer and just drag index.html into Chrome, and it should open up. Or Firefox. It might work in Firefox. Totally up to you. I'm going to just increase the font size a little bit in that. It's going to get better in a second anyways. Now, this is not a design class. Never going to grade you on design, ever. Like, granted, people seem to like to offend me with colors, though. Like blues and reds and crap. If you're not much of a designer, there's this wonderful thing called Bootstrap, which will make your life much simpler. We'll look into Bootstrap and attaching the library later on, especially when we get towards assignment time or lab time, just to make your life a little simpler. Okay. Anyways, so I provide the CSS for this one, though. The first place we need to go is to open our index.html file. I'm just going to close off my side doc. So that's the only thing open. I'm going to decrease the size of the browser a little bit and increase the size of my IDE. I mean, I have mobile-friendly meta tag in here, so we do have mobile friendliness to this page, at least a little bit. Not much. All right, and the first thing we're going to do, I'm not going to get into a lot of HTML stuff. If we tackle anything, we will be tackling the template tag in HTML, which is an HTML5 tag. We'll be doing that in the future when we talk about loading things in dynamically and keeping our HTML separated from our JavaScript. But when I do that, I'll introduce that and we'll go over it. Other than that, most of the stuff we're doing is basic HTML. I will attempt to try to keep some nice, decent structure to my pages, kind of follow some semantic value a little bit, just to kind of reinforce the learning that you had with Jess or Scott. These meta tags, I'm sure you're used to them. If you're not, the first one basically defines the character set for the page. The second one, it just basically defines what type of mode we're in. I don't even know why I'm using it because it's not even necessary anymore. But the third one basically defines the viewport size. So if you were to load this on a phone, it would try to orient properly as opposed to being a full-size website switched down into a phone. That's what the third one does. And title tag, I'm sure you already know what that is. So why don't we actually add in the style sheet. And the code for that is pretty simple. You've probably done it a couple of times already. I actually have to look it up every time because I forget every single time. It's like a weird one. It's not one that just stays in your head, right? So it's link rel style sheet, type equals text, CSS, media is formatted for the screen, and then the href, which is probably one of the more important tags in there. The href tag basically is where our file is located. And for the most part, when we do this, I'll just be keeping index and JS and CSS all at the same level. Later on, as we learn directory structuring, we'll start to put it into the directories properly. So this is right at the main level, and it's just styles.css. And if everything is copacetic, I used to work with a guy that used to say copacetic all the time. He didn't quite understand what it meant, so he always used it incorrectly. That and ascertain. Hated that. Anyways, if you refresh, you should see my wonderful styles. 3D text is not hard, by the way. 3D text is actually pretty easy. Doesn't do anything, because we don't have any functionality. We have a button that does nothing. We have an input field that we can definitely move up and down in, but doesn't do anything. Just basic stuff. Below here in our body, actually this whole page, from the HTML at the top of the page to the HTML closing tag at the bottom of the page, is called our DOM. This is our document, right? This is our entire HTML document. The document object model is a really cool thing. How many of you worked with ORMs before? One of you? Yeah, so ORMs are object relational mappers. I tell you, once you go ORM, you never go back. Writing raw SQL is not like writing with an ORM. ORMs are so much better. Basically what an ORM is it wraps your database and turns it into objects, which makes it really easy to do things like querying the database, creating new records, updating records, stuff like that. You can kind of think of the DOM as like an ORM. It wraps our page and objectifies, yeah, that's a good word, objectifies the DOM structure basically. So it allows all of this thing to be different objects and properties. The HTML tag at the top is an object. The head is an object. Meta is an object that has a property called charset attached to it. It just makes the whole thing a wonderful object. Because of this, we can actually target it with JavaScript like we would in any programming language, targeting any object in a programming language. We can target it and we can work with it and we can do cool things with it. We can access different properties that belong to it, and each one of those things has their own properties, and we'll actually pull one open and look at what it is. And the cool thing about that is we can actually change our text dynamically on the fly, which is really, really neat. We can also make cool, stupid games like this. All right, so if you scroll towards the bottom to line 36, you'll see add link to external JavaScript file. Anytime we want to write scripts, any JavaScript, you can write it in two different places. One, you can put it in an external file, which is the preferred method, right? Keep your JavaScript out of your page. Put it in something else. That way you can kind of keep them modular, right? So in order to do that, we just write script, close the script tag. And if I want to write JavaScript directly here, right in the page, and I don't want to do it in an external file, I can just write whatever I want between these script tags. So, well, not whatever I want. I have to maintain syntax. But I can write console.log, for example. Hello, everybody. That was a terrible Dr. Nick impression. All right. Oh, that's not going to work. I mean, what are we using? A Motorola cell phone? All right. Down here is our console, this thing here. I'll show you how to open that. If you right-click on Chrome, you can choose Inspect. And when you choose Inspect, it opens up the Elements tab of your console, of your developer tools. Then you can click on the next one beside it that says Console, and that will open up the actual JavaScript console. That's the slowest way to get there. F12 is probably the quickest way to get there. F12 will open up your developer tools and hopefully should land you right into your console. If you're on a Mac, Command-Alt-J. If you're on Windows, you're screwed. I don't use Windows. I don't know what the shortcut is. If anybody wants to be nice, does anybody know the shortcut?
Control-Shift-J.
Control-Shift-J. There you go.
What was the one for Mac?
Command-Alt-J. Or Command-Option-J if you want to say it in Mac world. All right. So I'm going to enhance this, which I thought was kind of cool, that I can actually increase the size of this so you can see it a little better. And now you'll notice that even though I've saved it over here, nothing's happened on the other side, and that's because I have to refresh the browser, right? So if I refresh the browser, bam, you should see hello, everybody. which is being output from the console.log. Console.log, you're going to use it tons. That's your debugging, right? It's how you debug things. It's how you be able to tell what's going on. And it's really, really cool because it gives you a lot of information. Something I just recently learned as of this morning is Chrome's kind of changed how console.log works a little bit. And if you give console.log an object, it will actually put it to string. So it kind of stringifies whatever it is. If you want to see it as the object itself. Now, if you're working in Firefox, it keeps it as an object. But if you're working in Chrome, you have to do a different, slightly different command. It will work in both browsers, though. And I'll show you what I mean. Why don't we grab one of these tags that's in here. We'll grab this p tag that's on the page here. We'll create a variable, call it var p. Var is a modifier that actually identifies scope. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But var, p is the name, or if we don't want to call it p, we can call it paragraph. Maybe that's a bit more verbose. Var paragraph equals, and then I want to select the paragraph tag, which is this one here, where it says between 1 and 100. And the way I do that, some of you that have done JavaScript in the past probably remember like get element by ID and get element by CSS and yada, yada, yada. We don't need all that anymore. Now we can do document dot query selector. And the cool thing about query selector, its argument that it takes is literally a CSS selector. That's all you need. As long as you know CSS selectors, which you should because you guys did HTML and CSS, as long as you know CSS selectors, you can grab any element on that page, right? So we just give it the CSS selector, which will be the p tag. It's the only paragraph on the page. Incidentally, though, query selector is kind of interesting because query selector will go till it finds the first element that you told it to and then stop. It will not go further, right? So if you have 16 paragraphs on the page, it will only grab the first instance of that paragraph and then it's done. It won't move any further, okay? If you want to get all of the paragraphs on the page, you have to run something called query selector all, which we'll look at way later. All right, so we have this wonderful thing. If I use console.log and output my variable paragraph and then refresh my browser, all it shows me is this wonderful paragraph tag, right? But incidentally, and I'm going to make this a little bigger so that we can see everything that it outputs. If you change the word .log to .dir, so it's console.dir, and then you refresh your browser, you'll notice this fancy little gray arrow right beside the p tag. If you click it, it gives you a list of every property and method that's attached to that node. This is really, really handy when you're trying to be like, how do I get the height of my paragraph? Like I want the height of the element. Oh, there it is, client height, 26. That's in pixels, by the way. 26 pixels, cool. Where is it located based on the left side of the window? Well, it's 0. 0 pixels based on the left side of the window. It's 459 pixels wide. Right? These properties are really handy, and those are properties. Those ones there are properties. Methods will have functions in them. I don't know if I can find one really fast. Parent element, maybe? Yeah, parent element would probably be a function. But you can navigate through these properties by doing something called chaining, which is really cool. Does Java support chaining? It must. So chaining would be like my object dot this thing, dot this thing, dot this thing. That's called chaining. And the object, as it mutates, just keeps moving through the chain. JavaScript supports that as well. It supports chaining. So you're able to just continually do dots and work your way through here. So we could actually go from paragraph. We could go, why don't we start up here? We'll go to paragraph dot next sibling. And that's a text node. And then from there, we'll go to dot, anything fun in here? No, none of this stuff is fun. All right, let's grab the node name. Node name. And that's chaining. So We take the paragraph, we move into the next property, right? And then from that property, we can now move into the property of that property, right? So now if I hit refresh, we get hashtag text. Woo us! Anyway, so that's just like a brief intro to how the console kind of works and how we can actually see some of this stuff. Now we're going to use your knowledge that you just gained in the last 10 seconds to actually fill out our JavaScript game. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my console window down a little bit just so I can see it. And if you find that your console window is getting cluttered and you're on Mac, you can hit Command K and it will clear it. If you're not on Mac, another way to clear it is type in the word clear with, it's a function, so you have to use parentheses, and that will also clear it. So now we're going to follow this comment properly because we haven't so far. It says add link to external JavaScript file. Well, we're not doing that. We're writing our JavaScript in here. And incidentally, if you link up to an external JavaScript, you cannot also use the script tags then to write JavaScript on the HTML page. You get one or the other. You don't get both. All right? I know, reduce, reuse, recycle, not in JavaScript world. All right, source equals, it's src. You guys are probably familiar. What other HTML tag uses source? Image, yeah. And I always call it main.js. That's a lie. I don't always call it main.js. I did in this particular example. And if we click refresh in the browser, nothing happens because we don't have any code on that page. I made you look. All right. I don't know if it's like this in your IDE, but I have this cool thing. I can hit Command T, not on that thing, not over there. Over here, I can hit Command T, and it shows me a list of my files, and I can move between them very, very quickly. If you don't have that, you probably have this wonderful side window. If you're in Visual Studio Code, you have that side window. Different browsers have it. Click on the main.js file, and it will load up my wonderful JavaScript file with all the slew of comments. So incidentally, this is commenting in JavaScript world. Double slash is a single line comment. Okay? If I want to do a multi-line comment, all I need to do, put an asterisk. I'll end this in an asterisk. I like to put this on the next line. Why did that happen? That's one of my packages that I have inside Sublime being fun. There we go. So now we have 3 lines. Can make it even more. Basically, anything between the 2 asterisks, the opening asterisk and the closing asterisk, will become a comment. And that allows you to do multi-line. So there's multi-line commenting, and then there's single-line commenting, which is done with the 2 forward slashes. Okay? Yeah, we learned something. All right. Step 1. Grab the h1 and store it in a variable. All right. So we'll do var h1 equals document dot query selector, right, which we just learned about. And what CSS tag would I use to grab the h1? h1. Why not? It's the only h1 on the page. Have you guys had an SEO class, search engine optimization class? You should only ever have h1 on the page, incidentally. All right, cool. So what we've done here is we've created a variable. This little var thing is called a scope modifier, right? The scope modifier, there's 3 of them. We have var, we have let, and we have const. And we'll actually take a look at that in the next hour. Var basically scopes. It's called functional scope. It's within our function environment, right? So if I had a function defined, it would be within that functional environment. Incidentally, when you open up main.js, you don't see it, but there is a main function, right? You know how you guys code Java, you have to create the entry point, the main function. Without that main function, your app will not run, right? You have to have that entry point. It's required. The same thing goes with JavaScript, it has a main function. It's just obfuscated from you. You don't need to see it. So that's what's currently happening here. This may seem like global scope, but it's not. It's within our main function. It's within that page function. So we're functionally scoped with var. Var's fantastic because it functionally scopes for us. Cool. So that means basically that this variable will be available to this current scope line and anything defined underneath it. So we might as well say it's basically globally scoped. All right. Incidentally, if you want to create a true global scoped variable in JavaScript, just remove the scoping modifier. That now becomes completely globally scoped, available anywhere within your application. Okay? But best practices is to use var. Actually, better practice is to use let, but we'll talk about that in a bit. All right, the next thing we want to do, I want to grab this input and store it. That way I can check what the user's doing with it and be able to do some fun stuff with it. All right, so I'm going to store that in a variable called input. What's the syntax that I use to grab an element on the page? It's literally 2 lines above it. Dot query selector input. There you go. Great, we've got the input, we've got the H1. We are happy campers. We should be about user experience. Love or hate the user, we need to respect the user, whether we like it or not, right? They're our bread and butter. They're the ones that put food on our tables. So what would be really nice is when they load this page right now, when you refresh the page, your cursor isn't in any specific spot, right? So if I start typing, nothing happens. It'd be really nice if the cursor was exactly where they need to be when they load the page, instead of them having to go and click on that spot and then type. It's a better user experience to me if they start right there, right? So to add focus, very simple. We take the variable that we just set, which currently contains the input element object inside of it, and we call a method that's available on it. It's actually an event-driven method called focus. We call focus. And what that will do is it will take our cursor and immediately fire it right into the input, and we'll start right there. And you can see that if you refresh your browser, you'll see your cursor nicely flashing inside the input box. Starts off right there. So that's cool. Maybe not really. All right, step 3, grab the button and store it in a variable. Well, we know how to do that. We've done it so many times already so far, twice, 3 times. Selector, button. And obviously grabbing things using this type of CSS selection can be a bit problematic, right? What if I have more than one button on the page? I'm only going to get the first instance of that button, right? So there are ways around that. We could use, what's something we could use to create, distinction between 2 elements on a page? Yeah, an ID tag would be perfect. You see that quite often, especially in JavaScript application development. People like to use IDs. If you've had Scott, you know how much he does not like IDs or classes. But when you're doing JavaScript development, it definitely makes things a little easier. I kind of like Scott's idea of the CSS Ninja approach, where you basically walk through the HTML structure and access that thing right at that point. But I can tell you from working in a development shop, that does not work because people move crap around. And then all of a sudden your CSS breaks, right? So it's better to use IDs and classes and things that just pinpoint exactly what the thing is that you want to work with. All right, so we've got our button. I need to stop going on tangents. Step 4, initialize a variable to store the number of guesses. Well, that makes sense. Var guess count. And we'll initialize it with 0. Incidentally, you can instantiate a variable in JavaScript without a value. It'll be undefined, but you can. So you could do this way, which you'll see quite often, right? This currently has a value. It's called undefined. And undefined is also a primitive data type in JavaScript, just so you're aware. Primitive data types being like car, string, float, things like that. Those are primitive data types. In JavaScript, we don't We don't have float, and we don't have integer. We only have number. That's our primitive data type. We have string as a primitive data type. We don't have char. All right, so then to initialize it, we just call guess count equals 0. So you see that quite often. People like to take all their variables and define them at the top, and then go through and initialize them throughout their script. You'll see that very, very often. It's called hoisting. They like to put all the variables towards the top and then initialize them afterwards. All right, we need a random number. I mean, we could hard code the number, but what fun is that? It's always the same number, right? And doing a random number is very easy in JavaScript, especially compared to something like C++. Random number generation in C++ is very complex. All right, so basically what this does is seal. What does seal do? Does anybody know?
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
Rounds it up.
rounds it up, yeah, basically. Well, it doesn't really round it. It immediately pushes it up, right? So if it's 1, it will stay. I think if it's 1, it'll stay where it is. That's, you know what? We can always test this. This is the wonderful thing about our console. If we do math.seal 1, stays at 1. But if we go to 1.1, it goes to 2. That's the whole thing about seal, right? Whereas if we go 1.1 and we were to call the opposite of seal, which is floor, it'll go to 1. Okay? That's what floor and seal are. It's kind of something you may not be used to. People like to use round, right? But round starts at 0.5. At 0.5, it rounds up, right? And anything below 0.5, it rounds down. So anyways, we're basically taking it and sealing it. And the reason why we're doing that is math.random is going to return a number between 0 and 1. Weird, right? Which means it's like 0.1 or 0.1.25, or sorry, not 0.1.12567. The random number is always between 0 and 1. So we need to convert that into a whole number, right? So we're going to multiply it by 100. And then we're going to seal it so that it immediately goes to the next number. So if it does wind up being 1, we'll still be within our range. So that's cool. So we got our random number. Step 6. Add an event listener that will execute when the button is clicked. Remember how I told you that we have the ability to listen to when the user interacts with our page, right? Clicks, mouse overs, scrolling, any of that type of stuff. We can hijack that and then perform an operation based on that event occurring. So we're going to actually put a button event that listens for the click. So when the user clicks the button, we're going to hijack that event and then execute some code. All right, let's take a look at what that looks like. So first of all, the element that we're doing this on is button, which we've already stored in our variable. And we have a few different ways we could do this. I'm going to teach you the way that you're going to see most often, which is we're going to add something called an event listener, which makes sense, right? The click is an event. It's an event that occurs. You know, it's nothing I'd pay for, but it's an event. That was a lame joke. I'm so sorry. All right. Click. That's literally the thing we want to listen to. Incidentally, it doesn't make the noise, though, which is stupid. But function. Oh, you probably haven't seen this before. Well, some of you have, because some of you have coded JavaScript. But those of you that haven't, does anybody know what this is called? It starts with a C. 8 letters. Sounds like... It's a callback. It's called a callback. So basically what happens in this scenario is the button has an event listener listened to it, which adds it to the event list. When click occurs and the click event is detected, it will call this function, right? So we could define the function outside, define its body like you guys have done in Java. You've defined functions, right? We can define it outside and then pass it the function definition, which we'll look at in the future because it's a little bit different than what you would expect. Or we can do this, which is an anonymous function that we can literally just pass to it, and it will call it immediately. The second it's done, second it detects that click event, it calls that function. Okay? So that means we have to give it a body, right? We're going to give a body between the curly braces. But let's finish off the syntax. There we go. And we're going to take this curly brace and this parentheses and this semicolon at the end of here. We're going to cut it. And we're going to put it at the very bottom. And then all our code is going to go in the middle. Incidentally, when you're handing in labs, assignments, anything like that, my only pet peeve is left justified code, which means all of your code is left justified. All sits along this particular border. Please use tabbing. Use nesting. Makes it much easier to read your code. Okay? You guys are year 2-ish? Yeah? Yeah, so you shouldn't be doing that. Yeah. We should be good. I won't deduct marks, but I may yell. All right, guest count. So one thing we want to do is we're keeping track of the guest count. The reason why we're keeping track of the guest count is because, like, what fun is a game if all you can do is guess 100 times and eventually get to the answer, right? The guest count allows us to be able to kind of say, hey, you know, there's a lose scenario. And our lose scenario is going to be if you guess wrong 10 times, you'll lose, which may seem, you know, a little daunting considering it's 1 out of 100. But don't worry, we're definitely gonna mitigate against any issues there too. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is increment the guest count, not plus minus, plus equals 1. And generally, JavaScript formatting for the syntax preference is to use plus equals instead of plus plus. A lot of people like to use plus plus, right, to do their implementation. Plus equals is considered the better practice in JavaScript. Not sure why, but that's what it is. All right, step 6C, provide a when condition. So if something, then do something. All right, let's see if you guys have your logic hats on here. I sound like you're in like grade 4 or something. You got your logic hats on? Yeah, okay. All right, what condition do you think I would want to check? What am I comparing to see if you want? Yeah, input, and then the random number. That's it. We don't need the guest count. Guest count wouldn't be right. But the random number, right? This is the number that's getting generated. And we want to take their input and compare those things. If they match, they won, right? So we can do that quite easily. So in here, we do input.value. That's how we get the value out of our input box. It's a property that is assigned to the input node, right? The compare condition is equals. We're not doing a strict comparison. A strict comparison is 3 equal signs. We're doing a loose comparison. And the reason why I'm doing a loose comparison is because the input field inside guess a number, when I go to retrieve that and pull it back, even though it's a number, I get back text. Every time. Never fail. But JavaScript's a loose language, right? And because it's a loose language, it doesn't care that it's a string. And it doesn't care that I'm comparing it to a literal number. Doesn't care unless I write 3 equal signs. If I write 3 equal signs, then it cares. Because then it's like, not only do these things need to match, but they also need to be the same data type. That's when it gives a damn. So we're going to use loose typing. And we're going to compare it against random num. Which makes sense. And the cool thing about this is every time we click the button, it's going to execute this function. It doesn't just do it once. It doesn't just do it on page load. It literally does it every single time we click the button. And the reason is because when we reload our page, at that exact point is when this function gets bound to that button. It binds it to that button, and that function now becomes its property. It's a method that is connected to that button that will always execute whenever we click. That's what happens. All right. So we'll write some stuff. So any of the text nodes that we've grabbed back, like h1 or the p tag or any of those, they have a property called text content. Text content is a two-way street. We can either read from text content and see what is already stored in there, or we can write to text content by just reassigning a new value. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go text content equals awesome sauce U1 home bruh. There you go. I mean, you don't have to write that. It's pretty douchey. But we should be cool too. Because like when you go through this, one of the achievements in order to distinguish yourself from your buddy is that you did this whole thing in 3 guesses and he did it in 10, right? So you want to be able to compare. So what would be a really cool thing is to provide back to the user how many guesses they had. So we'll do that in the next line. We'll do h1.text content. And I don't want to do equals. Why don't I want to do equals?
Oh.
Yeah.
Because it'll overwrite the first message.
Exactly. What do you think I want to do?
You want to add it.
I want to add it. That's exactly. I want to concatenate it. So I'm going to do plus equals. Plus equals says, hey, take the original value, then add this thing on. The exact same thing we did when we did plus equals to guesses. Only now we're doing it with a string. Plus equals. And we're going to write this inside here. So we're going to put a space in, right? Because we want a space after the bruh, right? Total guesses with a colon. And then we're going to concatenate our variable. Plus guess count plus there we go. And there's a few different ways we could write that. We're actually going to look at that in the next hour, after this hour. We do have something called string interpolation. Are you guys familiar with string interpolation? String interpolation is pretty cool. It actually will assess an expression right in the string. You just write the expression inline in the string, and it will actually parse it immediately within the string. It's pretty awesome. All right, and then if we win, we don't want to continue on, right? We don't want to continue on through the code and doing anything else. So what we're going to do is just return. Not going to return true, not going to return false, not going to return a value, literally just going to return. Which, that's it. That's done. Code is done. We've exited. We're not doing anything else. All right, let's write the fail event. If the guess count equals 10, and you can write any number you want. Maybe you want to make it a little easier. Make it 50, right? Give yourself 50 guesses, because that won't be a gigantic pain to test. h1.text content equals you lose. And then we should provide some feedback to let them know so they're not like, their OCD isn't going completely crazy haywire. We should tell them what the number was. Like, you don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm going to tell them what the number was. The correct number was plus random num. And then again, I want to return. Return. All right, we have some hints. Because we're dealing with 1 to 100, it would be a good idea to give people some hints. That way it's easier for them to kind of narrow down the range that they're trying to work with. So we'll write a simple conditional statement. If input.value is greater than random num, then we'll rewrite the h1 text content and say it is too high. Yeah, man.
Can I add one change? Like after guess count equals 10, can you make new random number? Because like then you're gonna go to turn 11 and hit the right one, and then it'll tell you like you won after you lost.
You're saying after here, after the guess count equals 10, you can keep clicking the button?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We don't actually kill the script, unfortunately. You're correct. We would generate a new random number. But even better than that would be a while loop. Put the whole thing in a game loop and allow them to be able to play again. Right? So they lose, and then we allow them to play again. Allow them to play again. In the next example, we're going to do a phrase guess, right? And in that, we just disable all the buttons. So they can't do anything. I mean, we could do that here as well. We could totally do that. Yeah, why don't we do that, actually? We'll do it in 2 spots. So this is this wonderful thing I was telling you about. My IDE supports multi-select. So holding Command, I can click in one place, hold down Command, and click in another place. And now I have 2 cursors that I can work with simultaneously. And I can go button.set attribute, disabled, disabled. Or you can write it in one spot, copy and paste it in the second spot. That's totally
How did you pull up the 2 cursors?
So I hold Command. Are you on a Mac or a Mac? So it's Command. So first click in one spot, hold Command, then click in the next spot.
It's Alt for Windows.
Is it Alt for Windows? It might be Alt for Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
I'm using WebStorm, and it was option.
Oh, is it Option as well? All right. Yeah, multi-select is really, really awesome stuff. If you have an IDE that you love, learn its shortcuts. I could not stress that more. Learn its shortcuts because it kind of separates you from the guys that take a really long time to do a tiny chunk of code and you're like just whipping through because you understand your IDE so well. It's like if you play StarCraft, right? What separates you from those Koreans is the ability to use shortcuts. At the end of the day, we're never going to be as good. I've been playing StarCraft at work at lunch. It's pretty fun, actually. All right, so now we're going to disable the button. So basically what happens is they lose, we disable the button. They win, we disable the button. Doesn't allow them to do anything further. Better than that would be to give the option to replay. But in order to do that, we'll have to wrap it in a while condition, and that's not till week 4. So we'll do that in week 4. All right, so let's provide some hints. So we have the hint for too high. Obviously, we only need to do the exact opposite to that. h1.textContent equals too low. And then a really good user experience would not be to leave the number in the input box. Because if we do that, that means we have to highlight the number, click delete, or hit delete, sorry, and then refill out the number. It'd be better for us to just clear it completely and then re-put the focus there, right? So we're going to do that. I'm going to move this down because this is in my way. Hey, there we go. There we go. All right, so over here in our IDE, I'm going to type in input.value equals blank string. I suppose you could do null. Actually, no. Could you do null? Yeah, you could do null if you wanted to, instead of an empty string, but I'll use an empty string. And then I want to reapply focus back to that thing. How do I do that? Input.focus, that's correct. Input.focus. And that's it. That's why I love this example. I mean, even me going on tangents, it only takes 40 minutes to plug it through. All right, let's refresh. Oh, it is definitely focus without an E. Yes, it is. I mean, what's wrong with focus A? Right? Or focus. Oh, that gets dangerous. You don't want to say that. All right, I'm going to refresh. Sure enough, we have our cursor there. Somebody give me a number. 23. All right, 23. Click guess. Too low. 85? 85. Too high.
53.
53. Yeah, I'm going to do this till we're done. 53, too high. So we know it's between 23 and 53.
48.
48. Oh, we're only going 5 numbers down. Too high.
43.
Are we going to go in increments of 5? What do you think? Yeah, so are you saying we're going to do 38 next? Oh, wait, 43 was too high. So that means we're lower. We could do 38. Too low. So it's between 38 and 43. Anybody have like good perception that they 42? Awesome. There you go. And 7 guesses. Not too bad. All right. So why don't we take a break? We'll meet back here at 6. And then we'll do the next step, which will be next week's basically lesson. We'll power through it. I don't know if we'll get to the example. If we don't, we'll do the example at the beginning of class next week instead of the review. Okay? So yeah, take 12 minutes, get yourself a coffee or something. Be back here for 6. I don't know whether or not we're going to get this entirely done in today. I think that might be a bit optimistic, but we will definitely try. Just before we do that, a lot of people attribute JavaScript as like, yeah, you know, JavaScript's like that language that you do, you know, funny stuff in the browser. It's okay. It's whatever. It's no C++, right? It's no Objective-C. But that being said, JavaScript is now being used to build applications all the time, right? It's also being used to build video games. This entire game is built using JavaScript. And it's kind of an interesting read. The game is not too bad. It needs some work because some of the balancing is a little bit off. But it's pretty good. It was definitely worth the money I paid for it. But you can follow his development. He had a blog right down here. Worst place to put a link. And you can go through how he talks about different things he did, such as using Canvas, using actual CSS and HTML to do static assets because it was better for delivery, object pooling, which is kind of an interesting concept, how he dealt with things like traffic and how he dealt with buildings and stuff, and making sure that buildings were in front of other buildings, things like that. It's really cool. I definitely recommend reading through it. It's pretty interesting. But the cool thing about it is it's inspirational as well. Like you can take this language as loose as it is, as simple as it is, JavaScript, right? It's just a scripting language. It's a very simple language to work with, and do something as cool as build a city builder with it, right? So I think that's pretty neat. Anyway, so I thought I'd share that. Let's move back to the resources. So we're going to go to client side again. I hate this thing that closes on the left here. Weekly learning. Oh, just before we move too far, there is a quiz in week 1. This quiz here. You very likely will be able to get away with not reading all of this to answer this. It's not that difficult. It's about 8 questions. They're pretty easy for the most part, and to be honest, it's more programming fundamental kind of stuff than it really is JavaScript. But it is worthwhile to look through the reading anyways. And the quizzes are open. Obviously, I know some of you are going to do the quizzes together. I don't care. That's not the point. The point of the quiz is to try to reiterate things we've learned. That's really all it's about. So don't forget about that one because we're moving on to week 2. 2 weeks in 1 class. Yay! Get it done by December 13th and we're good. Get it done by the time I enter the marks and we're really good. Yeah.
How many attempts?
There's 12 of them, I think.
Number of attempts.
What else? Just 1. Yeah, only 1 attempt. All right. So there's actually there's a little survey that I kind of wanted you guys to do that we're in week 1. So go back to week 1, back and forth. This is ADHD at its best. Click the how comfortable are you with JavaScript? And I built this wonderful thing in Rails and used the free Heroku server. We're actually going to learn how to deploy to Heroku in this class, which will be very handy for you because DreamSpark sucks and Azure doesn't allow tons of concurrent connections. Heroku is free. Might as well use it. Anyways, load that up. Go ahead and answer that question. It uses Ajax in the background, which is JavaScript. As soon as you click it, it will immediately send your response. You can change your response. You don't have to necessarily be married to it. It will only allow you to do 1 response. And it's anonymous, not capturing anything about you, not grabbing your IP addresses or anything like that. It's an anonymous thing. So go ahead and answer that because it helps give me some feedback on how far we can progress and how fast we can progress. Cool? Ooh, we've got a master. That's awesome. Notice that the master only makes up 2% of the class. That's 2 groups too, by the way, out of 82 students. So, all right. Oh, master's gone. They had doubts. Yeah, they took that back. All right, that's cool. So the way I view it is what's JavaScript means. This is brand new. I've never heard of it, never touched it, which is unlikely because you did a minor amount of JavaScript in Scott's class. If you had Scott for HTML, you probably did a little bit in Jess's as well. I've heard of it means that you've kind of worked with it, maybe touched it, you've at least looked at a doc or something. I've coded in it in a small amount means, maybe you use Jquery or maybe you just did one simple thing of binding to an event on the screen or something, or maybe you just move something with it. I can manipulate in the DOM well means that you can actually select elements on the page, you can move them around, you can hide them, show them, animate them, that kind of thing. And I'm the master means that you are comfortable in this. Node, vanilla, jQuery, doesn't matter what library I give you. I can give you an object on the screen. You can go tell me what the properties and methods are from it. Stuff like that. Like you're really comfortable with JavaScript. All right? That's basically how that breaks down. Cool. Thank you for filling that out. Let's go to weekly learning. Week 2. Do we have time for the review survey? Yeah, we got to do the review. All right. Let's answer the review survey. This is kind of cool. This is a quiz where you and your peers help try to figure out the right answer.
Says we're sorry. Yeah.
What?
We're sorry.
Ugh.
Just for this good.
It might be too many concurrent connections. So just refresh and it should probably work. If not, come back to it at another time and then fill out your answer. In the meanwhile, I'll check the Rails logs and find out what's going on. I'm guessing that Haruka's like, dude, too many connections. We're giving you this stuff for free. Come on. All right, let's move on to the next piece then. So we have a file there that says variables, numbers, and strings. That's going to be our project that we're working with. So let's click on that, download that to wherever your folder is that you're downloading it to. Hopefully it's a Comp 1073 folder. Doesn't necessarily have to be. Once you have it downloaded, make sure you extract it. Put this over here. This up here. I'm going to close off my number guessing project. And I'm going to open the new one inside my IDE. I'm going to go to desktop where I downloaded it. And I'm going to open up the folder. There we go. There we go. That's cool. And if you've got it all extracted right, you should have, I think it's 5 files. Yeah, 5 files in one fonts folder. And the 5 files should be index.html, numbers.js, strings.js, styles.css, and variables.js is what you should have. And the first file we're going to work with is the index file. So we'll open that up. And I've already attached the style sheet for you. You'll notice on line 8. And then obviously in our browser, we're going to want to open up our index file over there as well. So I'm going to go to Open File, go to my desktop, starter variables, and open up index.html. And that's what you should see. And if you scroll through, you'll see that I've put in some DOM structure for us, and I've been using IDs. And the reason why I'm using IDs is because I have multiple sections, and I want to be able to target, that one section. So instead of just walking my way through the DOM, I find it much better just to use an ID and basically ninja right to that particular structure, right? If we scroll down, you'll also notice I've already attached the 3 scripts for you. Those are your 3 JavaScript internals. I'm going to add a little comment above it. So commenting in HTML is done with a less than symbol, an exclamation mark, 2 dashes, 2 more dashes, and a greater than symbol at the other end. Incidentally, if you're using a Mac or in Windows, sometimes in most IDEs, you can hit Command / slash, and that will immediately put comments in for you in whatever particular language you're working in. Or if you're on Windows, it might be Control / and that'll insert the comments for you. All right, and then here I'm just going to say attaching external JavaScript. And I guess we might as well work from the top down. We'll start with variables, and then we'll work to strings, to numbers, and then if we have time, we'll get to strings. We might not have time because I think there's like 100 lines for each one of these, so it was meant to cover over a whole lesson. But all right, so let's open up variables.js. So I'm just going to open up my sidebar here, open up variables.js, and you should see all these wonderful things. So when we declare variables, we have some rules, right? And these rules are not new. They pretty much apply to most programming languages. I can't really think of any programming language that might break this. But the rules are variables must contain only alphanumeric characters. Okay, so that's A to Z and 1 to 0, or 0 to 1, or 0 to 9, 10, yeah, 9. Must be only alphanumeric characters. You know what I mean. Variables cannot begin with a number. Okay? Many programming languages are like that. They don't allow you to begin anything with a number when it comes to a symbol name. You have to begin it with an alpha character. Variables cannot be reserved keywords, right? So you can't name a variable called for, because that's a reserved keyword. You can't name a variable called if or else or anything like that, because those are reserved keywords. Okay? But other than that, you have totally open-endedness to what you name your variables. Don't be a dick. What I mean by that, don't write variable A equal to your name, right? Call it variable name, right? Name your variable based on the content that you're going to store in it, okay? Don't name variables A, B, and then when you run out, do AA, BB, and then when you run out of those, do AAA, BBBB, right? That's the worst. That is the most horrible thing in the world to do to people. It makes it very difficult to follow your code. And you're not saving anything in the end anyways, because during any compilation in a system, all your variable symbol names get ripped out. So there's no reason to do that except for to make things much more difficult for everybody else reading your code. So make sure you name your rules. That's more like the unwritten rule. Make sure you name your variables something that's contextual, right? Makes sense. Okay? Same with function names. No function A, function B. Name them something relative and contextual. All right. So let's talk about global variables. We talked a little bit about global variables. So this is a global variable. X equals 26. That's a global variable. It's global because it is not functionally scoped. It is not block scoped. It is literally accessible to everything. There's nothing that doesn't have access to this variable. A functionally scoped, but also kind of global because we're literally defining it at the top of our enter point, is var y equals 27. That's also basically globally scoped because it will be available to us in anything that is a child, right? And a child is literally any function we define inside this file will definitely be a child, okay? And we can kind of see function scope a little bit. We're going to write what's called an IFI. And we're not going to get too much involved with what an iffy is, but basically suffice it to say that it's an instantly invoked functional expression. And basically what it allows us to do is just scope some stuff that we want in it that we don't want to be reached out of that scope. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to do function inside the parentheses. Kind of like what we did with the callback, right? Whoops. That broke. That was weird. Okay. And to get it to fire, all we need to do is add two more, nope, not 90, two more opening and closing parentheses at the end. So what will happen is this will automatically fire. The second we execute our script, it'll immediately invoke. But what it does for us is it actually encapsulates anything inside of it into that scope. I'm only doing this to kind of show scoping. Don't really worry about it. You're not going to use ifs all that often. All right? But it allows us to do things like this. So w equals 40. What scope does that variable have?
Like just inside the function.
Nope. It's global. It has global scope. That means that variable has access, is accessible outside of this iffy. Even though the iffy is actually scoped to only within itself, the second we don't include a scoping mutator on it, like a modifier, it becomes globally scoped, right? So you have to be careful about that. Be careful that you forgot to include var, or you forgot to include let, or you'll wind up globally scoping your variables. All right, so let's do another one. We'll do var j equals 29. What about the scope of this one? What is its scope? Right? So that means, do I have access to that outside the iffy? No, I do not. Right, and we can see that. So if we do console.log j, and I'll open up my console here. That should spit out. And if I refresh, we can see 29, right? It's kind of hard to see. Yeah, we can see 29. It spits out just fine. But if I try to console.log j outside of the iffy, we get an uncaught reference error, meaning that this is not defined. It's not there. It doesn't know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to reference something that does not exist, right? However, if I change the j to a w, I'm now wanting to reference the global variable that I defined within the iffy, right? And based on one piece of information that somebody said was that shouldn't be accessible because it was defined within the iffy. But I argue that it's global scope, so it should be accessible, and it is. So you have to be very careful about not scoping your variables. Okay? Cool. Block scope. Block scope's pretty interesting. We're just going to do this in an if condition. So if true, which means it's always true. It will always execute. We're going to define a functional scope variable, var m equals 5. And we're going to define what's called a block scope variable. And the block scope variable uses the modifier of let. And I'm going to do let n equal 5. So let's see if we can guess this one. What is the scope of this one? Do I have access to that one, variable m, outside of the if condition? How many people say no? Okay. And what about this one here, n? How many people think I have access to n outside of the if condition? Nobody. Cool. That's great. Well, we got one. One naysayer. All right. Let's console.log m. Right? Now remember who you were that said we have access to this outside of the if condition. Right? That's the one defined with the variable scope. Okay? Refresh, and sure enough, we do. This is a functionally scoped variable, meaning only if it's defined within a function is its scope locked. But we're not defining it in a function. We're defining it in a block, That's what these curly braces are. They're a block. And that says that it doesn't care. It's like, yeah, whatever. I'm still going to be available. I'm still visible to everybody, right? But let is like, damn no. No. You define me in a block. So if I console.log n, we get a reference error. And the reason is because n says I am only scoped to these curly braces. And that can be a bit of a gotcha because people think they have n available. They think they have n figured out, but they don't. That means for loops, while loops, if conditions, else conditions, anything you can think of where there's a block. Functions, let will be scoped within that definition, okay? So that can be a bit of a gotcha. All right, let's change that back to m so we can get rid of our reference error. That goes away. Updating variables in JavaScript, very, very easy, right? Let's do var me equals whatever your name is. You can easily update that. Just do me equals and another name. See? No problem. Very simple to do it. You can even change the data type. I can make me equal to 5. And as you can see, I changed data types entirely, and I'm still okay. It doesn't care. It's a loose language. If I want to check the data type, I can use an operator that's available to me in JavaScript called typeof. And typeof will let me check what my data type is. And in order to do that, in the console.log, just before the me, type the word typeof and put a space after it. So there's a space between the variable and the actual typeof. And do that in the one after the string and the one after the number. Like so. And then hit refresh on your browser. And you'll notice that we dynamically change types from a string to a number without needing to redefine a new variable or anything else. It had no problem. We didn't have to do any casting, nothing. All happened behind the scenes. All the magic that needs to occur is obfuscated from us. We just call it. Something you can't do, though, is redefine a variable. I can't do var me equals Bobby B, baby. Or maybe I can, actually. I might have that actually confused with another one. We'll see. Oh, no, it does. I think it's let, actually. Let won't let you redefine. Yes, let, sorry. Var you can redefine. You're totally fine to redefine it. Let you can't. Let will blow up. All right, let's talk about constants. ES5 introduced constants into JavaScript, which is fantastic. Before ES5, we had var. That was pretty much it. Constants, right? What do we use constants for? What is the one major property of a constant?
It's constant.
It's constant. Yeah. Non-mutable, right? We don't mutate it. We set it once and leave it. Set it and leave it, right? Set it and forget it, as they say. All right. Const earth equals rotates around the sun. We hope. Now, if we try to reset that, if we go earth equals rotates around the moon, and we hit refresh, you get a type error. And that's the reason is because constants are immutable. You are not allowed to mutate them. All right? Mutate. Change. That's what mutate means, in case anybody's like, what the hell is he talking about? All right. I'm going to comment that out so that our code is not breaking. Nope, now we have a weird syntax error. on got variables JS1. Unexpected number. Oh, yep, that would do it. I'm not sure how that even remotely got affected, but whatever. What is happening? That's weird. My file is changing all on its own. There we go. Okay. Constant scope. Constant has scope. Constant scope is the same as let scope, which means it's what? Is it functional scope? Block scope, correct. So if true, const hello equals world. And then I attempt to console.log hello outside of that block and hit refresh, I get a reference error, right? Because it's block scope, which means inside those curly braces is the only place I have access to that constant, okay? Incidentally, like I said, you can't define let twice. You can't define const twice within the same scope, but you can define it in a different scope. That's totally legal. It's only if you move this into here that it will blow up until you're trying to redefine the scope. You're not allowed. Or no, redefine the variable, and you're not allowed. So now the thing to understand, though, is all these variables are available, whether they're set with let, const, or var. They are all available to you within child scopes. Okay? So if you have let parent scope equal 39, let redeclare var equal 50, let exploding var equal 43, and then we will create a nice if true let's do console.log parent scope. Console.log exploding var. All right. And interestingly enough, I can recreate one of these variables with let inside that scope. I'm totally allowed to, as long as I don't call it first, which can kind of break your brain a little bit. But if I call any of those variables that are preset outside in the parent, it will blow up if I try to redefine them. So right now, I'm calling parent scope. That'll be fine. I'm calling exploding var. That is fine. I can access both of those. I am okay to access both of those. I can redeclare the redeclare variable. That's totally fine. That is perfectly valid. And I can output its value. Which will be 5. But what I can't do, because I've already accessed exploding var within this scope, I can't redeclare it because I've already accessed it. So just to recap, because I can see the confusion on your faces, we have declared and instantiated 3 variables: parent scope, redeclare var, and exploding var. Okay? I have accessed 2 of these variables, here and here, by reading their values. If I don't access them, I am allowed to redeclare them and give them a new value. That is totally fine. But if I've already accessed them, I can't do this. That will blow up because I've already accessed exploding bars. So obviously, proof is in the pudding. Notice we get the redeclare var. Right. It's exploding on line 51 because we've tried to reset it. We tried to assign something to it, and it says we can't do that because we're already within that scope. If we comment that out and refresh, everything works fine. So you just have to remember, if you call it, you can't redeclare. You can move this up before you call it, and then you're fine. And the reason why that is because we're in this scope, and you've defined this, and now you're trying to call it, and it's like, no, you defined it down here. I don't have access to this, right? Because you've already defined it in that scope. Little confusing, I agree. Don't worry too much about it. Just be aware of it, right? Especially when you're working on labs and stuff like that. When buggy things happen in JavaScript, these are part of the reasons why. All right? All right, let's talk about data types. We don't have many. We have a few primitive data types. We have strings, we have numbers, we have arrays, we have objects, we have undefined, we have Boolean. Those are all data types that we have available to us as primitive data types. Let's take a look at what a string is. Whoops. That's a string, right? Stop hitting random buttons. That's a string. Basically anything between two quotes. Nothing between two quotes is still a string. That is a string. The quotes can be double. They can be single. It doesn't matter. There's no difference between the two because you don't get string interpolation with double quotes or single quotes. So it makes no difference to you. It comes into effect when you're trying to do different things, when you actually choose which one you're going to use. So for example, double quotes works really well when you're trying to do something like possession, right? Sean McKinnon's legendary name. Boy, I must have been feeling humble. So log name. All right? Single quotes comes in handy when you want to use double quotes within the string. Name equals that is hilarious. I just like that it's like a chipmunk voice. It's the best part. When you're using single quotes, it's very good for encapsulating double quotes. But obviously, you don't always get to choose what set you're going to use and have the convenience, right? I mean, you might wind up with a double quoted string inside your single quoted string that also has possession. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with characters that are obviously going to create an issue? Like if I said Janelle McKinnon's, right? It blows up. It blows up because it closes the string. I'm now closing the string here. And then this part here is open and it's like, I have no idea what you're trying to do here. So what we have to do, does anybody know what we have to do?
Escape characters.
We have to escape it. That is exactly it. How do we escape characters? It's literally the same in every language. What's that? Forward slash. That's it. Bam. We escape that character, and now the string is fine, and it's happy, and JavaScript's not mad at us anymore. And if we refresh over here, we should see our wonderful strings. Everything is golden, pony boy, as they say. But like that's tedious, and that's annoying. ES5 made it less annoying. They gave us something called string interpolation. String interpolation is fantastic, but it's a bit weird, okay? So in Ruby, we have string interpolation where we do double quotes, and then when we want to evaluate an expression, we wrap it in curly braces. In PHP, we just call the $sign, right? Because string interpolation in PHP sucks. You can literally only output the variable. That's it. You can't do anything else fun, right? You can't actually do expression evaluation in PHP, which is really stupid. But string interpolation in JavaScript allows you to evaluate expressions as well, right directly within the string. And I'll show you how to do that. So if we did name equals, and then this is a bizarre thing. We use backticks. Backticks are right below your escape key. If you're on Windows, I don't know where they are. They're the little...
Same thing, same.
Same place? Yeah, so they're below your escape key. Right below the little squiggly line known as a tilde. These words that you don't learn until you start programming. All right, now within the backticks will evaluate anything that we put inside them. So standard text, Humphrey Bogart fights. And then if we want to evaluate an expression, we do $, curly braces, and anything in there will be evaluated. So I can put a variable in there, save it. Oh, helps if you console.log it out to the page. Console.log name. And you can see it evaluates. Humphrey Bogart fights Janelle McKinnon. But we're not limited to that, which is like that's PHP level kind of crap, right? We actually have more capability than that. We can do much, much cooler stuff. We could do that's a good one. Oh, we can just do an expression. So 5 plus 5, and it will evaluate. Humphrey Bogart fights 10. You could call like full out expressions in there. We could do date. No, we have to do new date. New date. Refresh. Humphrey Bogart fights Tuesday, September the 11th, 2018. It's a pretty cool thing because you can actually parse right directly in there. That string interpolation is so handy. It is something that you will do often. I would definitely learn how to use the backticks and learn how to use string interpolation. It's a godsend for sure. All right, let's talk about data types real fast, and then I think we're going to run out of time. Var my int equals 25. Okay, cool. Console.log type of my int. Let's see what changes if we change that to my int equals minus 40. Right? That's a negative. Console.log type of my int. That's fine. If I was to evaluate that and do, is it type? I can't remember the C++ version of it, but if I was to check what the data types of these two things are in C++, they would both be integers. They would both be unsigned ints. That's just what they would be. No, signed ints. So they would be signed integers. In JavaScript, that's not the case. In JavaScript, they're both numbers. Okay, which is fine. But what if I do a float instead? What if we change this and we add in a float? So var my float equals 0.2. Console.log type of my float. And like we have two decimal data types generally, right? In most languages, we have floats. And what's the other one we have for higher precision? Doubles. Yeah, we have doubles. Floats are generally 4 bytes. Doubles are generally 8 bytes. They're double precision. That's hence why they're called double, because they're double precision. But in JavaScript, everything's stored. Every number that is stored is a double. Every number. Never fail, has double precision. That's just how it deals with numbers. That's just what it does. Doesn't matter how you write it. Doesn't matter how it outputs it. They are all doubles. That's how they're stored. Now, if we actually look at this, though, you'll notice its data type is number. All numbers in JavaScript are numbers. That's it. Right? They're all stored as doubles, but every single time when you go to look at the primitive data type, they're all numbers. Every single one. So that's cool. We have another one. I wrote all of that underneath booleans. Let's move it above booleans. Booleans are pretty easy, right? They tend to be the same in every language. There are some differences depending on the language you're working with. There are languages that evaluate true and false as actually true and false. Other languages evaluate them to 0 and 1, right? JavaScript is no different. It actually evaluates them to 0 and 1. Console.log my bool. Refresh this thing and you see it's true, right? Add type of in front of it, just to see what type it is. You can see it's a Boolean. But interestingly enough, console.log my bool loosely equals 1. It's important you do loose, not strict. If you do strict equals, which is equals, 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 that will be false, okay? Because it doesn't match the data types. But if you hit refresh, it's true. So another thing, you need to be cautious with loose comparison. Loose comparison can lead to some problems. Because if you're expecting something to be 0 and not false, and you compare it, you might wind up with false. So for example, if you have an integer and you're checking its value, and you say if my int, then do this, and it equals 0, you just said if false, do this, which is obviously going to be nothing. It's going to just blow up and not work, right? So you need to be careful of your comparisons. And we can see that actually, because if I take the same line and duplicate it and just add one more equal sign and hit refresh, we get false. And that's because it's saying true equals 1 and it's a Boolean. And it's like, no, 1's not a Boolean, 1's a number. And so that's where it blows. All right, step 4. This is like grazing over arrays. We're not going to get deep into arrays till 2 weeks from now. My R equals, and arrays in languages like Java and C++, they are strict to the data type, right? So if you define an array of integers, they all have to be integers. If you define an array of, I don't know, characters, they all have to be characters, right? But in JavaScript, we can get Bob is 39, and yeah, that's true. That's totally fine in JavaScript. It doesn't care. Incidentally, arrays are objects in JavaScript. How's that for a bit of a mind bend, right? Most things in JavaScript are objects, actually. Some of the primitive data types aren't until you try to do something with them, and then they get casted as an object, and they get wrapped with objects. Almost everything in JavaScript is an object. It's safe to say if you want, and I'm only saying this because it's on the quiz, everything is an object in JavaScript, which isn't 100% correct. But we'll say most things in JavaScript are objects. All right? And last but not least, we have objects as well. What has happened to this thing? I'm missing tons of stuff. I must have deleted a whole whack of stuff. Let's create an object. We use JSON notation. That's how we do our objects. So our object contains a key and then a value, right? Which you can think of as a property. That's no different than a property. If I want to access type, all I do is call animal.type. That accesses the value in type, right? Name is Murray. This is my golden retriever. He's an asshole. Retriever. And anybody who owns a golden retriever knows what I'm talking about. Color. Should we spell it the American way? Let's spell it the... No, okay, we'll spell it the right way. He's golden. Most times he's golden. I'm just kidding. He's adorable. He's absolutely. But what's cool with this is I have all these wonderful properties. I'm not limited to those. I can actually throw a function in here as well if I want to. I can define a function which you would consider a method, right? Just put a method right directly inside my object. But we're going to do a lot more object stuff in week 7. 8. We have a midterm on week 7. To output this stuff, all we have to do is console.log animal.type. Hit refresh, and you can see it's dog. Very easy to work with, very simple. And we're right at the end here, so why don't we just do one quick thing first. If you grab an element from the DOM, let's do var element equals document dot query selector hashtag variables greater than p. That's my DOM selector. Basically, it's going to grab the element section that has the hashtag variables, and it's going to grab the p tag. There's a woman on the other side of that mirror that's smiling at me. I'm not sure why. She just disappeared. I don't think she can see in, but I can see out. That's pretty funny. All right. I guess you have to be there. All right. If I do type of with this, if I go console.log type of var element, I'm guessing it's an object. To be honest with you, I didn't try this. I was actually just curious. Yeah, it's an object. Yep. Kind of thought it was. And that makes sense because when we look at it, the element has properties, right? When we do console.dir, remember how we did that before? If we do console.dir, var element, and refresh, we get the wonderful p tag, and there's all of our properties and methods that are available on that actual object. Next week, we will do the other few files that are listed there. We will do strings, and we will do numbers, and we'll do the example. I thought we'd be able to get through 2 lessons, but I don't think so. I'll make a filler lesson for Thursday's class so that we can catch you guys up. But other than that, that's it. You guys are free to go.
How are you finding time for the new game with 2 jobs, man?
Well, we play. I play on the weekend, and I have a lot of this already done. How do you mean? Like console.log it?
Just bought 39 too. That's it.
This here? You want me to console.log it out, or what do you want me to do with it?
So I